thank you for having us today, and well done for making it through towards the end with still some energy left. Hopefully you've got enough for this talk. So today I'm going to be talking about truly informed UX using actionable insight. And as he's mentioned, I come from a background of heading up CX teams, so it's always covered UX, service design, and research. And one of the things I truly believe is that a lot of research isn't actionable enough for product and UX teams. So what we do now is focus purely on just the research side, and our whole goal is to make research as actionable as possible. So I'm going to get maybe some of you up on your feet, if that's okay. Can you stand up if you've been in this situation? So been in a situation where you've carried out a discover phase, or you've done some kind of discovery research, but you don't have any more budget or any more time to do any other research for the rest of the project. If you've been in that situation, if you don't mind standing up. Double hands up there. Okay, cool. Okay, stay standard, sorry, keep you up. Okay, stay standard either way, but if you've been in this situation, can you join the others? So if you haven't been able to carry out research, but it's okay because you've got time to do some testing, whether that be A/B testing or some kind of user testing, please join the others. And whoever was already standing, if you've been in that situation too, put your hands up. Okay. So if you look around, there's quite a lot of you so far. Okay, and then final situation, if you've been in this situation before where you haven't been able to do any research because there's no budget to do it properly. So it's like all or nothing. We can't do any research. Please join if you have been in that situation. If on any of your projects you haven't been able to carry out any kind of research. So we've probably got about 3/4 of the room standing up. And this is, you can sit back down, sorry. This isn't a surprise, you know. We've known this for a long time, that consumer research does not happen as often as it should. I'd say it's an elephant in the room, but actually it's not. It's kind of just known knowledge that we all have. But we don't seem to be doing enough about it. There's definitely more research happening than what historically has happened, but we're just not doing enough. Now, the reason why this is a problem is because there becomes an assumption gap. So you may even do some research activities, even if it's quite small. You may be doing something, but it doesn't actually help you understand how to design for the actual outcome. So you end up filling it with assumptions. And if any of you attended David's talk yesterday, a lot of your confirmation biases come out here as well. So yeah, imagine you carried out some audience insight. You understand who your audiences are. You then still build some assumption to be like, well, these audiences care about this, and this is why this is important when I do my design. And that's why there's a bit of danger in doing that. What I'm not saying is that you have to have research on every single design project or any kind of innovation brief, because there are some briefs where you actually just want to innovate and think and kind of do some future thinking work that is not limited by just what consumers say or what they do. But this is a problem. So as I said, this is kind of a situation that maybe a lot of us know about as UXers, CXers, service designers, product managers, that there's this challenge of us not doing enough research. It's been kind of a battle that maybe we've had for the past 20 years, I would say. But maybe something that is more surprising is the root cause, or one of the root causes to it. Like, what's one of the bigger issues that is underlying that might be a root cause of it? And I'm not going to talk about, you know, budgets or the fact that there might not be enough time to do it, or the fact that there's not enough ROI on UX to know the impact of what we're doing. No, there's something else that's happening that I think might surprise you, which is that less than 15% of people find that the insight that they generate or receive to be very actionable. And that number actually drops when it comes to experienced teams. So experienced teams, even more so, they need actionable insights the most, I would say. Experienced teams do not find that the insights that they generate, that they've created themselves, to be very actionable. And that's worrying. I promise you I didn't make this stat up. It came from a study that we ran earlier in the year with 1,000 participants who are either researchers or commissioners of research. They could sit in marketing teams, product teams, sales, ops, experience, research and insight. And it was a global study run with 9 different markets, and it covered off agencies, government, startups, large brands, freelancers. So such a wide range of profiles, yet such a common outcome of levels of effectiveness of research that comes up. So I will dot some insights throughout from this study that you'll see some of this on. But this is why, as a business where I work, ImpactSense, we care about making research as effective, efficient, actionable, robust, and accessible as possible. When I say accessible, it means that for our clients, because the research is effective and efficient, they can afford to do it more regularly. And that's what you want to get to. You don't want research to be this one-off thing. You want it to be something that people can do regularly. So that's what we care about. Okay, probably last time I'm going to get hands up and get you doing anything physical, but which of these two would you say delivers the most insightful outputs? If you think ethnographic research delivers more insightful output than surveys, can you put your hand up? Okay. And if you think surveys delivers more insightful output than ethnographic research, put your hand up. Okay. They may be a little bit more on the ethno side, but actually quite an even split. Usually when we ask people this, they say ethnographic research. They say ethnographic research is where you get the depth and you know, like the unknown insights that you didn't realize that you were going to discover. But in our study, what shockingly came out is when we asked people about actionable insight, actionable research, ethnographic research came at the bottom of the list, and surveys came up higher. So that's actually quite surprising, right? That there is a difference between the insightful side and the actionable side. And I'm going to come back to that. Generally, people agree that a mixed method approach has the most effective outcome of research. So what came out of our study is that the majority of people said you get most effectiveness if you've got a mixed method approach, but actually then the next level of effectiveness is with qual and then quant. So you can see there's like some conflicting things here. What this taught us is that there is actually a huge difference between research that is insightful and research that is actionable. And you need both, but they don't have to. Insightful research isn't always actionable, and actionable research doesn't always tell you some unknowns that you didn't realize. So it's so important to have that balance of both. And when we asked people what actionable insight actually means, a lot of it is quite functional. So it's about identifying a solution, meeting business goals, being able to communicate clearly to stakeholders, adding the context around things. And then the final one, which actually really surprises me, is having an answer to the problem or insight need. So imagine that less than 12% of experienced teams believe that their research answers the problem or insight need. That's something that we need to deal with and change. So I think that's probably enough for context setting for today. I hope that gives a bit of a view. And what I want to do today is come back to these 3 situations that we stood up for at the beginning and go through them and say, how do we tackle these 3 when you are on limited budgets? How do you do it when you want your research to be efficient and effective at the same time? So let's go through each of these. Okay, let's start with the burned budget. So we've already carried out a discover phase, and we can't do more research on the project. So what are the problems with this? Well, the first thing is that discovery phases tend to focus on a fixed point in time, usually up front, usually at the beginning. And the risk of that is that you don't know what challenges, insight challenges, you're going to face later on down the line. So you're doing it early on with limited knowledge of what you actually want to discover. The second thing here is that discovery phases tend to be quite high cost and effort, and that means that stakeholders tend to have a reluctancy to do more. And the final thing here is that often, and this isn't always the case, but often discovery phases lack the depth required for delivery teams, because the delivery teams will discover new insights later on down the line that they need to carry out research for. So this is obviously different from doing like continuous discovery, but when you tend to have a discovery phase, tends to be the issues with it. And what our study showed is that continuous discovery doesn't happen as often as it should, because what came out of our research is that 75% of research being done is done on a large scale, which means months or longer, as we defined it in our study. And only 4% of experienced teams do regular small-scale research. And that is where there's huge opportunity. Regular small-scale research, that is where there's huge opportunity to do a lot more actionable research. So it's a shame that we're missing out on this. If you think of when you're in sprint cycles, how you can do like rapid insight feeding in, that seems to be the thing that is missing in a lot of people's approaches and processes. So let's go through the opportunities for this. The first opportunity is focus on chaptering your research into micro insights. So let's say you've got budget to do a discovery phase and you're fortunate enough to have that. How can you chunk it up? How can you put it into chapters so that you are gaining micro insight into these areas across the end-to-end process? And let's say you do need to do a discovery phase up front. Sometimes you do need that foundational insight. That's absolutely fine. Just make sure that you save some budget to do some validation later on so that it's not all going up front. So think about how you chunk up budget in that way too. And then finally, try and get the balance of foundational insight along with actionable insight. So if you are in a discovery phase and it's something that you need to do or you choose to do, think about how do you structure it all so that it's not just about the foundational insight. It's not just about understanding audiences and understanding who they are and what their needs are and what their overall journey experiences are. It's more than that. You will know that later on down the line, you're going to need to know what is the priority of information on a product landing page. So start bringing some of that into a discovery phase if you know that you can't do research later on down the line. I was about to say any questions on that, but I know it's all through Slido, so I won't open it up yet. Okay, the second situation is the testing fixer. So we haven't been able to carry out research, but we'll validate it through testing. It's all good. Okay, first problem with this, whether you are doing A/B testing, usability testing, proposition, campaign, messaging, product, whatever testing you're doing, the problem with it is you're only getting feedback on what you put in front of the user. So you're missing out huge opportunities that sit outside of that. The second thing here is that testing generally has higher emphasis on functional feedback, and you could be missing out on emotional insights, on wider needs, on the context, on opportunities that could sit outside of that, what you're putting in front of them. So it's really important that you go beyond just the functional. One of the things that we always talk about is having the balance of functional and hedonic needs, and making sure that you've got that emotional side as well as the functional side. And the combination of those first two means that you could be getting false validation on the success of your test. So if you just push something to a participant and they give you feedback and you're like, great, they said that we should change this thing and this thing and this thing and then it's going to work. It still doesn't mean that you're going to get high adoption rates because they just gave you feedback on what you put in front of them. You think it's going to be a success, but actually there's something else that they need that you haven't catered for their need, but you didn't know that. So it's really important that you cover that part of it too. So on this one, what our study showed is that different teams across the business have different priority research methodologies that they would preferably use. I'm not going to go through each of them, but the two green ones up there, so experienced teams and product development teams, which you think may have been more aligned in their research approaches, experienced teams tend to have more focus on exploratory insights, so ethnographic research and surveys and understanding needs and that kind of thing, whereas product development teams had more focus on user testing, A/B testing, multivariate testing. Neither of these are wrong. We need both. So it's about how do you get that balance of both, and how do you make sure all teams see the value in all of the methods as well. So the opportunity for this one is think about having a continual research dialogue, even if you're just in the co-creation validation stage. So let's say you couldn't do any research up front, you've got validation. Instead of just doing one round of testing with 60-minute sessions, think about how you can chunk that up. One of the things that you might be able to do is have 10-minute sessions with participants every week for a couple of weeks, and you co-create in between. And by doing that kind of thing, you've got a bit of rapid insight validation that happens that is like an ongoing conversation with participants, rather than saying, give us feedback on this one thing, great, we've got this feedback, this is what we do. The second thing here is, if you can only have a fixed point in time of where you do some form of user testing, and let's say they are 60-minute sessions, how do you divide up that 60-minute session? Don't use the whole session for proving your solution. Don't use the whole session for validating your ideas and what you think would work and what you want to get feedback on. Use at least half the session for understanding needs and understanding context and going wider than that. And that's really important. I would even say use 3/4 of the session for that, because it still gives you validation. If you know this is someone's need, you know your product didn't cater for that, then you know that this has not proved that idea. So it's important to do more than just kind of do direct testing. And then finally, like if you've ever heard me do a talk before, I always go on about this, but don't be limited by the methodologies that you know. Try and create your own ones. This is what we do as ImpactSense, and I think it's really important is going beyond just traditional research methodologies. Your limitations are not one-to-ones. Your limitations are not surveys. You can go beyond that. And even if your limitation was one-to-one sessions, what you do in those 60 minutes, be creative with it. Really think about what is the purpose of the research. What do you want to know? What do you want to get out of it? And actually think outside the box and think about what's going to give me that answer. Don't just think about, right, this is how I'm going to write a discussion guide, and this is how I'm going to do my card sort, and this is how, like, think beyond what you've been trained in or what you find online. Just an example of this is one of our clients wanted to question the way that journey maps were created. So they were doing journey mapping with participants, and what they found is that people don't remember what experiences they had. So instead of just trusting what participants said and said, yeah, this is the journey I went through, this is how I felt at this point in time, and then this is what happened next, they took on a methodology, an approach of what police do, which is how they interrogate witnesses, but not in a horrible interrogative way. And you go back to the participant maybe a week later and you ask them different questions around it and you trigger their memory. And so there's so many methodologies that you could take from other things, like from counsellors and the way that they ask questions and things like that. So really do go beyond methodologies that you've been taught from a CX, UX researcher perspective. Okay, and then finally the all or nothing. So there's no point in doing research if we don't have enough budget to do it properly. Right, so problem with this, like research, it's important for it to be robust. So I know that confidence and accuracy are key. Like I get that. But if it always came down to budget, some organizations, they would never do any kind of research. And the perception is there that research is expensive and it takes time. And that's not necessarily the case. There are ways of doing it smarter. And finally, one of the problems is that if you're in a culture of where research is not done, the success of a project without research encourages stakeholders to say, we don't need research because we've had a successful project without it in the past. So if there's ways of being able to bring in research at any opportunity, please do it. And this is one of my favorite statistics that came out of our study, which actually shows that effectiveness does not increase dramatically when your budgets increase dramatically. So whether you have budgets of less than 10K, or whether you have budgets of up to 100K, the effectiveness of research is almost the same, which is amazing. That's actually great news. It means you can do effective research. I mean, 30% isn't very high, so that number needs working on. But you can actually do effective research equally with lower budgets. And we do this a lot for our clients as well, because there's smart ways of doing research. It doesn't have to cost the earth. Obviously, the numbers shoot up quite a bit when you have budgets of over $1 million, which is understandable. But yeah, I just love that this shows that you can do effective research with low budgets. So the opportunity here is start small, and this proves that you can actually start small to get actionable value, and then that often does release more budget. So an example of this, if you need to understand audiences, your prospect audiences, and you don't know much about them, you don't have to sell in a mixed method approach that says, right, we're going to do 30 interviews, we're going to do ethnographic research, we're going to do jobs to be done, we're going to run a study that validates this at scale. You don't have to do all that. You could start with a quant study, which can cost less than 10K, and you can say, right, we now understand that these are roughly our prospect audiences and their sizes. What we don't know is how to attract them, and therefore we need to do more research. But we know that there's this huge potential of audience that we're not tapping into. If it gives you some insight when you do research, a small part of research, then it can open up more budget to do more afterwards, especially when you start sharing that insight across the business. The second one here is if you actually have zero budget, like zero budget, then gather behavioral data from existing sources, like look internally, see what you have internally and use that. And that won't give you all the answers either. But behavioral data as an example will just show you what the problem is. So it might say, right, do you know what we're seeing? We're seeing a pattern of people doing this or dropping off here, or this is happening. And this is a problem. We don't know why, we don't know the root causes, and we don't know how to execute it. We don't know how to fix it, but we know that this is the problem we're having. And if we don't fix it, this is the risk and cost to the business. So by doing that piece of research, which is free, I mean, it might take a bit of your time, but not actually that much. You do a little bit of that kind of research for free, it can definitely open up opportunities because they see the risk and they see the problem with it. And then finally, think about what kind of tools you can bring into your organization that can complement your team. So a few people have been talking about AI here. I know there's a whole kind of stream around it. I'm not going to be talking about it, but one thing I will say is that we have brought in tools that make our team's jobs a lot easier. So you take away the brain power of the elements that a human doesn't need to do. We don't need to transcribe interviews. We don't need to even categorize them. We don't even need to say, how did people answer this question? Because AI can do a lot of that for you. The way I see it is an additional resource on the team rather than taking away from the team. It's actually giving us access to people in a way. And so we do that, and that helps us use our brains for the analysis, for the insight, for the richness that we need to do. So tools like that really help as well. Cool. So what I'm going to do is just very quickly cover off 6 principles of effective research, which may seem obvious and may sum up some of the things that we've talked about, but it sits across all those 3 situations plus more. So the first one is purpose. Sounds so obvious, but having specific research goals and having an achievement-focused research project is so key, but it doesn't happen. And a proof point of that is the fact that actionable insights research is not as actionable as it should be. The second is don't let budget dictate what you do. Like, let the research purpose set the tone. And this is the whole idea of, you know, not being limited by budget. It's really key. The third is thinking about when you time your research. It's not about doing it at the beginning. It's not about doing it after you've done some design work. It's about having it all the way through or at the effective points. If you can, at the beginning of a project, define where are the effective points of where we're going to need to know things and then time the research across there, then that will add value. Fourth is be creative with your methods. So again, if budgets don't allow you to do something that you want to do, think of a low-res version of it. Think of a kind of higher fidelity version that allows you to be more creative with it. The fifth thing here is make sure you focus on the outcome, the so what. Like when you write a discussion guide, if you were doing some kind of qual research, think of what the so whats are going to be when you write their discussion guide. So don't write the discussion guide of, yeah, it'll be cool to know this and this and this and this and this. Focus on the so what right from the beginning. Design it around the so what. And then just finally, think about ways of gaining new knowledge without it costing. And if I do have time, I am going to run a little exercise. And I do want to pass the mic around if anyone's up for answering some questions. And I'll come back to that in a second. So if you only take away 3 actions from me today, the first is have conversations with people. It's not just about talking to people and hearing what they do. It's also about observing and doing ethnographic and all of that. But have interactions with people, whether it's interactions or conversations. Keep it ongoing. Keep it as a dialogue. Don't see research as a one-off piece, as a one-off initiative, because it shouldn't be. It should be ongoing throughout the whole design approach. Second thing is adapt tradition. So be more transparent about the limitations of methods that you use and think of new approaches that are going to address the elephants in the room. So just one example of this. Not many people question the fact that when you do user testing, you do it in a lab. How are you taking people out of the natural environment and saying, right, now focus on you're in this situation. They're not actually in that situation. They're in a room being watched. It's not natural. And these are the kind of elephants that we should be questioning as researchers and coming up with more robust, clever ways of doing it. So yeah, adapt tradition. And the third is be outcome focused. Like really think about what you want to know to make decisions. And that's going to allow you to make really informed decisions, business decisions. Just before I open up with, I think I have got time to ask some questions. Just before I do, if anyone does want to see our report, download our report, which has a lot more data than what I've shown today, feel free to scan this. I think you have to fill in a little bit of information. And of course, you're more than welcome to share it and share the insights. But if you do share the insights, please do tag ImpactSense in it as well. Just because obviously it's our proprietary research, but do feel free to look at that. So I'm saying thank you, but I'm actually still opening it up. So are we all right am I okay to ask a question to the audience?
Yes, we are. Actually, we have David there with the mic.
Okay, great. So what I want to ask you is if you were working for a bank and you were working in the UX team, and there is a program of work that is about to start that is looking at redesigning the new app, and you have unlimited budgets. You can determine what kind of research you do. There's no time or budget constraints. What would you do? Does anyone have any views on this? If you do, mic's coming round. You've got unlimited budgets. Like, what ideally would you do from a research perspective? Anyone? Any hands? Don't be scared. Like, there's actually no right or wrong answer for this either. Like, this is, go for it. Oh, there's a mic coming for you.
I will hate my voice. So it depends on the product.
Okay. It's a banking app for existing customers, so like online banking.
I would go for a diary study,
A diary study, okay.
for example.
Yeah, and how would you run it? Like, what would you do?
I mean, we would have like interviews at the beginning,
Yep.
and we would run, I don't know, sessions with video recordings. They could submit it, and they need to think aloud. And then we would have, I don't know, follow-up interviews. It
Okay.
depends on how long the diary study would be, and it would be really expensive.
Okay, cool. Anyone else? Any other ideas of what else you would do, maybe to complement the diary studies? Any
Can I go
views?
for this one? The same example that you gave. So we did a very small scale tree testing for a menu for a financial institute.
Yeah.
And it was just published through Facebook. People joined in, and it actually gave a few insights. So like very small snippets, but still, we got something out of it.
Was it expensive?
No.
How much effort, time was it from the team?
Well, bit of planning, I think, a few hours on the research side, a few hours to consolidate that research. So all in all, I think it took like 2 extra days.
Brilliant. That's a good example of effective research. What about if you had a more unlimited budget? What else would you do? Anyone? No views? You might say you would want to do lots of one-to-ones, like maybe with existing customers, we'll call them in and we would do 30 to 50. We'd get mix of people who already have the app, mix of people who haven't got the app and we don't know why. We might get a mix of, same for the diary study, get a mix of prospects and say why, what would attract you to the bank and what would you look for in an app that would make you do this kind of thing. Yeah, Jen?
Or a few smaller focus groups
Yeah?
with just 6 to 8 existing users.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So you would do that kind of thing, like focus groups, things like that. Okay, cool. You'd probably want to do some quant as well. So you'd probably want to do a survey at scale, maybe with 5,000, 10,000 participants if you had unlimited budgets. Okay, I'm going to now ask another question, which I'm sure no one's going to answer because this might be harder, which is, what would you do if you did have limited budgets? Like, based on what we've talked about today, like if you knew you had limited budgets, I actually think what Andre suggested would be a really good example. But if you did have limited budgets, what would you do in this situation? Any ideas or any thoughts? Like, try and get your thinking caps. Yeah.
You can use your existing analytics or existing tools like Hotjar or something similar.
Yeah, exactly. Cost nothing.
Yeah.
Good example. Any other examples? Yeah.
Just a basic competitor analysis.
Yeah.
Look at what other people are doing, where they're failing, where they're winning.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, some other free things that you could do. You could look at the Apple Store. You can look at Play Store. You can see what reviews people are posting up on competitors, on yours, on whatever. There's so many things you can do. You could actually sit in a branch if you had in the bank branch. If you had no time, you could get on with your day job and you can just observe people queuing and going in for doing tasks that they could do on the app. Like, there's so many creative things that you can actually do for free that is effective ways of doing research. So yeah, I just wanted to get you guys thinking a little bit about these kind of examples, and hopefully what it does do is encourage you to always have, where it's important, always have research embedded into your design approaches, even if you know you don't have budget, and try not to fall into the thing of, well, we don't have budget to do it properly, so we can't do it at all. So yeah, thank you.
So we have a few questions that came in.
Yeah.
So let's start with the first one. Our users tend to lose interest if we reach out too often. How would you motivate users to attend multiple small research studies?
Well, you do have to incentivize them. So we do tend to incentivize participants to take part in studies. So there's multiple ways you can do it. You can build up a community panel. So often we do this where especially when the audiences are niche. So if they're like B2B audiences or if they're hard to reach audiences, we actually get them set up on a panel and then we can ask them regular questions throughout. The other thing you can do is you have to manage their expectations. You can't send them a survey every month and say, tell us how this experience is, tell us how that is, tell us, or you have to almost be like, are you up for taking part in some research with us? It's going to be over the course of a couple of months. We only need 5 minutes of your time every 3 weeks or something like that. By doing stuff like that, you manage their expectations. You do have to keep it quite efficient with how you use their time. So the whole point of doing regular small-scale research is that you don't sit with them for 60 minutes or you don't send them a 20-minute survey. You're getting bite-sized information, so you may just ask them a single question. Another example of this, which we've done in the past, is use something like WhatsApp. You could pay them £200 for the month, which is what you might actually pay for a 60-minute study. And you can say, right, we're going to send you 20 messages throughout this month. You just got to answer a single question each time. But we're spreading it out throughout the month. Then anytime you've got an insight challenge, you can get the answer through that way. There's like really smart, effective ways. You've just got to create them and come up with something new.
Can you send money through WhatsApp?
Can what?
Can you actually send money through
No.
WhatsApp? Not that.
No.
Okay.
You'd incentivize them the other way. You'd get them, you recruit them first and then you can, yeah.
The other question is, how can $1 million be spent on research?
How can $1 million be spent on research? That was actually annual budgets, but it happens. Like, this is the crazy thing, is there's so much research being spent. I mean, we do projects that are like, some of our projects are like 10K and some of them are like 300K. And it depends on whether it's segmentation, whether it's brand tracking, whether it's market sizing, how many markets are involved and things like that. But $1 million can easily be spent if you're talking about like 15 different markets and you want to get the robustness of quant and qual and things like that. So yeah, it just depends.
So there's another one that came in, which I think is interesting. How do you eliminate bias as much as you can? A lot of users feel like there's an expected or right answer to when a question is asked, especially when they're incentivized.
Yeah. So we do all of our recruitment in-house ourselves. And I think that's such an important thing because when I was actually a student, I used to be a participant for research and it was amazing. I'd take part in research on a weekly basis and get like 100 quid for 60 minutes of giving my opinion, and I loved it. So there are people who are professional participants in taking part in research. And so I think it's really important to get authentic participation. So we ask a lot of questions, make sure people are who they say they are. We run pre-research sessions to make sure they're genuine. But also you do have to pay them for their time because it is their time and it's taking it out of their day job or out of what they're doing. But we eliminate bias by the way that we phrase questions, by the way that we ask things, by the way that we design the study. We've taken studies over from, I probably shouldn't name brands, but we've taken studies over from, well-known like brand tracking, large organizations and large research partners. And we see the questions that they've asked people and they're so leading and they're so clear to what they want the participant to answer. And it's just so wrong. So we're really, really careful about how we do that. And it totally changes the results. Like the results could come out totally different. And we always warn our clients, like when we see their questions, what we're going to ask, we know the results are going to be different. So you can't compare.
I think you partially answered this one, but maybe you can take another stab at it. How do you incentivize continuous research dialogue for the user?
Yeah, so continuous research dialogue, yeah. If you're doing, because as I mentioned, you kind of want to do it small scale, repeatedly. So you give them an incentive for a package. It's almost like you're saying, we need you for this period of time. For this period of time, this is what you're going to get. Rather than saying every time we're going to give you £100 every time we reach out to you. No, we wouldn't do that. And it depends on whether they're on a panel or whether you do something like WhatsApp. But with panels, especially if it's a very niche audience, like one of our clients is like their participants are like investment bankers, high net worths, profiles like that. you do have to, like when you get them on the panel, you have to retain them. So that does have a cost if we're talking about those kind of niche audiences, but that's different.
And I think the last one is, how do you define effective research?
I love this question. So for me, effective research is a combination of actionable research, insightful research, and robust research. If it's robust, then you can trust it. Something that came out of the study is that I think like most people are apathetic to whether they trust the research coming out of their studies. But trust is really key. So having robustness in the insight, making sure it's actionable, and making sure that you learn something new. If you've got those three, then it tends to be effective. And then if you have effective and efficient research, so you do it efficiently rather than it costing the earth, and it gives you the outcome that you need, then that tends to encourage more regular research to take place.
Let me just check quickly if there are any other ones coming in, but I think that was the last one. Let me just take 1 second and grab something.
Thank you.
Is there anything you still want to ask the audience?
No, I've asked enough, but thank you. But I'm also up for talking to anyone afterwards. I love to have these kind of conversations and understand people's experiences in these kind of areas as well. So if anyone wants to chat afterwards, please do reach out or contact me on LinkedIn, but that's my name. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Thank you.